How many of you had the experience that you had a strong gut feeling about something and you ignored it and you were sorry afterwards? Sorry that you ignored it. Just raise your hand if you've had that experience. Okay, most people here. Now, that's what I mean. That's the first sign of trauma, or the first impact of trauma, is a separation from yourself. Because your gut feelings are the strongest guide for what you need in the world. They're essential. How long would you survive out there in nature if you ignored your gut feelings? You wouldn't. You'd be dead. That's how important gut feelings are. What makes us disconnect from our gut feelings so that they're actually even there telling you and you ignore it? Well, you've been disconnected from yourself. That's the first impact of trauma. It's a disconnection from the self.
Ignoring gut instincts can lead to regret, as they are important for personal needs and survival. Trauma disrupts this connection, causing disconnection from oneself and others, leading to isolation and distrust. Reconnecting with gut feelings is key to emotional well-being and navigating life effectively.
The second impact of trauma is you disconnect from other people. No, you just don't trust others. You just don't trust others. And you feel very much isolated and on your own. Addiction is a very lonely kind of thing. Even if you use addiction to connect with other people, you're using it because you feel isolated. So there's a disconnection from other people, mistrust, and isolation. That's the second impact of trauma. The third impact of trauma is your view of the world. So how do you see the world? What kind of world do you live in? How I see the world, that's the world I live in. So if I see the world as hostile and dangerous and untrustworthy, I have a very different life. And if I see the world as basically a good place where there's suffering and there's joy, it's complex, but fundamentally I belong here. I live in a very different world if I believe that than if I'm convinced that it's a hostile, dangerous world. So trauma distorts your view of the world in a negative way. Number 4, trauma gives you pain. It gives you a wound that there might be some scar tissue over it, but the wound is never healed, actually. So there's pain there. And then that's pain that you need to escape from. So it imposes a lifelong pain. And I say lifelong, I mean until you deal with it. That's the 4th impact of trauma.
This is where it starts to affect your relationships. Because when you don't trust yourself, it becomes very hard to trust anyone else. You overthink people's intentions. You question if they really care. You keep your guard up, even with those who mean well. And sometimes, you feel alone even when you're not. Not because people aren't there, but because something inside you says, don't get too close, it's not safe. So you stay a little distant, a little guarded, a little protected. And over time, that protection turns into isolation. But here's the truth most people miss. You're not broken. You adapted. And what was learned can be unlearned.
The 5th impact of trauma is actually on brain development. What trauma actually affects our brain's development. Children have no self-regulation. So if you're stressed as an adult, if you're mature enough, you can regulate yourself. You can take a few breaths. You can calm yourself down. You can say, okay, slow down. Let me think about this. Let me deal with this. An infant can't do that. Infant's got no self-regulation whatsoever. So the infant's brain requires the mature function of the adult's brain to regulate itself. But what if the adult's brain is not functioning maturely because that adult themselves never got the right conditions for the healthy development? Now you have an immature adult's brain regulating or trying to regulate an immature infant's brain. So that self-regulation never develops. Number 6 is that trauma gives you a shame-based view of yourself. So you become actually ashamed of who you are. Not just of what you do, but of who and what you are as a person. So trauma gives you shame-derived sense of yourself. That's number 6. And the 7th impact of trauma is it makes it difficult for you to be in the present moment. It keeps you stuck in the past. So you react to the present, or you're thinking you're reacting to the present, but actually you're reacting to the past. And that's an important one because it affects everybody. Stress, when people usually think of it, is just some difficult or challenging or perhaps distressing psychological event. But that's not what stress is in medical terms. Now, stress in medical terms is a very specific meaning. It means a disturbance or perturbation of the body's biological status in response to a threat from the environment. So very specifically, if you and I were physically in the same space right now, but even if we weren't, if all of a sudden I became abusive to you or threatening to you, you'd be stressed. And by stress, I don't just mean instead of emotional reactions, I mean your body would change. And what I mean by that is that your adrenaline levels would elevate, your heart rate would increase, your muscles would tighten, there'd be additional blood flow to your muscles, diminished blood flow to your intestines, your blood pressure will go up, and the cortisol levels in your bloodstream will go up, and then you had higher blood sugar levels, all of which would enable you to fight back or to escape. So the physiological stress response is actually a response to a kind of environmental threat. And that has the benefit of helping you either escape or to fight back in the short term.
Stress happens when the body reacts to challenges or threats not just emotionally, but physically too. When stressed, the body releases adrenaline, the heart beats faster, and blood flow changes to help you respond quickly. This reaction can be helpful for a short time, but if it lasts too long, it can cause serious health problems.
In the long term, those same physiological stress mechanisms, if they extend over time, especially if you're not aware of them, which you don't necessarily have to be, will damage your body because adrenaline in the long term will increase your blood pressure, give you hypertension. It'll damage your heart, increase the risk of strokes and other negative. It will make you nervous, anxious, and so on. Cortisol in the long term would make you depressed, put fat on your belly, increase the risk of heart disease, suppress your immune system, thin your bones, and ulcerate your intestines. So chronic stress in the physiological sense actually undermines health. Yes. So when we talk about stress in medical terms, we're not just talking about sort of bad feelings. In fact, people can be stressed physiologically without even knowing about it. Mm-hmm. In fact, people can be stressed even if they're anesthetized. So that the stress is a physiological response, which may or may not be associated with a psychological awareness. But either way, it has physical consequences on the body, and chronic stress is known to create all manner of illnesses and undermine health in many, many ways. So when it comes to understanding something like cancer, we can't just understand it in terms of the individual. That trying to understand cancer by studying the individual human cell is like trying to understand a traffic jam by looking inside the internal combustion engine. You really have to look at the whole picture, and that whole picture involves the lifelong environment in which we live. And from that same perspective again, when we look at something like the obesity epidemic, which has 30% of kids in the United States overweight now, significantly overweight, it's not a food problem. Well, it is a food problem, the junk foods and all that. But it's mostly a stress problem, because what people do is they soothe their stresses, like any addiction. They soothe their stresses with their addictive behaviors. And those junk foods work in the short term because they release feel-good hormones in the brain. So if you want to look at children and prevent obesity, it's not enough to tell them not to eat junk foods or to get more exercise. You have to say what's lacking in their lives that they're so stressed, that they have to soothe themselves in that particular way. And what's lacking in their lives, of course, are human relationships that are nurturing and supportive. Again, not because the parents are not trying to do their best, but because the parents are trying to do their best under impossible circumstances. If you look at what actually triggers stress, the significant factors that trigger stress are uncertainty, lack of information, and loss of control. A lot of people are going to be stressed. And that stress then will lead to addictive behaviors. That stress then will lead to parents passing that stress on to their children. Now, what's the role of the immune system? The role of the immune system is to protect your boundaries against foreign invasion or against malignant transformation from within. It just follows then, there are many, many studies that have shown that suppression of anger is a major predisposition for disease. And this is why. Because when we suppress anger, we're actually suppressing our immune systems. Because they both serve the same function, and because they're united, they're one system. Whatever happens in one system will happen naturally in another aspect of that same system. But the point about all this is that nobody's born suppressing anger. Have you ever seen a 6 months old who doesn't want to eat when you want to feed him? Try it if you want to see genuine human anger. You know, you'll be worrying the breakfast very quickly. And that's because the kid doesn't want his boundaries invaded, and he hasn't suppressed his expression of anger yet. That happens to us later in childhood. But our brains are programmed in childhood, and once they're programmed a certain way, we tend to behave the same way all our lives.